My name is Eleanor, 32 years old, and last month I became a married woman. What my husband Robert never knew was that my beloved grandmother Beatrice had left me 3 valuable apartments in Boston when she passed away last year. I decided to keep this inheritance to myself, and thank God I did. Just 1 week after our honeymoon, my mother-in-law Diane showed up at our door with a notary and legal papers in hand. If you want to know how my world turned upside down, please like and subscribe, and let me know where you are watching from, before I tell you how I discovered my marriage was built on lies. I grew up in a modest neighborhood in South Boston. My parents worked incredibly hard, their entire lives. My father Thomas as a high school math teacher, and my mother Grace as a nurse at Boston General. We never had much in terms of luxuries, but they provided a stable, loving home filled with books and encouragement. They taught me the value of education and hard work lessons I carried into adulthood. But it was my grandmother Beatrice who truly shaped my outlook on life. Grandma B, as I called her, was a force of nature, a sharp-witted, independent woman who had bought her first property back in the 1960s, when few women made such financial moves on their own. After my grandfather passed away when I was just 5, she never remarried. Instead, she focused on building her small real estate holdings and creating a life completely on her terms. I spent nearly every weekend at her brownstone in Beacon Hill. While my friends were watching cartoons on Saturday mornings, I was learning about property taxes, investment strategies, and the importance of having an emergency fund. I can still hear her voice saying, "Young lady, always make sure you have something that is completely yours. No matter how much you love someone, keep a piece of yourself that belongs only to you." At the time, I nodded along without fully understanding the depth of her wisdom. It would take years and a painful experience to truly appreciate what she was trying to teach me. I worked hard through school, earning a scholarship to study architecture at Boston University. My parents were so proud, and Grandma B insisted on paying for my apartment during those years so I could focus on my studies without taking on debt. After graduation, I landed a position at a well-regarded firm specializing in historical renovations. Boston, with its rich architectural history, was the perfect place to build my career. Life was going according to plan until 2 years ago, when I met Robert at my friend Amanda's gallery opening. He was charming, intelligent, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. Robert worked in finance, managing investment portfolios for wealthy clients. Our conversation flowed effortlessly that night, and by the time I left I had his number and butterflies in my stomach. Our romance progressed quickly. Robert was attentive and thoughtful. He sent flowers to my office, remembered small details from our conversations, and made me feel valued. Within 6 months we were talking about a future together. Looking back now, there were warning signs I chose to ignore. The first time I met his mother Diane, she scrutinized me in a way that made me uncomfortable, asking pointed questions about my family, their occupations, and even our home address. Robert brushed it off, saying she was just protective of her only son. Then, there were the contradictions about their financial situation. Robert drove an expensive car and wore designer clothes, yet sometimes mentioned financial struggles growing up. His parents Harold and Diane lived in a beautiful home in Cambridge, but Robert occasionally alluded to helping them with bills. When I asked questions, he would change the subject or give vague answers about family investments that had soured. Most concerning was Robert's attitude toward money. Despite his career in finance, he rarely talked about saving or investing for our future. He spent lavishly on dinners and gifts, waving away my concerns about budgeting. Whenever I mentioned setting up a joint savings plan, he would say, "We have plenty of time for that boring stuff later. Let us enjoy life now." Last year, my beloved Grandma B fell ill suddenly. The cancer had already spread by the time it was discovered, and within 3 months, she was gone. I was devastated. Robert was supportive during this time, attending the funeral and comforting me through my grief. What he did not know, what no one, except my parents and the lawyer, knew, was what Grandma B had left me. To my complete surprise, she had bequeathed me 3 apartments she had purchased decades ago as investments. One was in downtown Boston in a prime location that had skyrocketed in value. Another was near the university, providing steady rental income from students and faculty. The third was in a neighborhood that was rapidly developing, with potential for significant appreciation in the coming years. Along with the properties came a letter in which she wrote, "Eleanor, my darling girl, these are for you to secure your independence. Remember what I taught you. No matter where life takes you, having these means, you will always have choices. Never underestimate the power of financial freedom, especially for a woman." As I sat in the lawyer's office listening to the details of my inheritance, I thought about telling Robert. We were engaged by then, planning our wedding for the following spring. But something held me back. Perhaps it was Grandma B's voice in my head reminding me about keeping something for myself, or perhaps it was those small doubts about Robert that I had been pushing aside. Whatever the reason, I decided to keep the inheritance private, at least for the time being. The properties were already managed by a company Grandma B had used for years, and the rental income went into a separate account. There was no practical need to discuss it immediately, I reasoned. After we were married and settled, I would bring it up naturally as part of planning our financial future together. 1 month ago, Robert and I had a simple wedding at a historic hotel in Boston. We kept it relatively small with just close friends and family. Diane seemed disappointed by our modest celebration, making several comments about how her son deserved a more lavish affair. Robert just laughed it off, saying his mother had always dreamed of a big society wedding. Our honeymoon was a week in Cape Cod, staying at a charming bed and breakfast. The weather was perfect, and we spent our days walking on the beach, exploring local shops, and enjoying fresh seafood. Robert was attentive and loving, and I pushed aside the lingering voice of doubt in my head. This was my husband now, my partner in life. Eventually I would share everything with him, including my unexpected windfall. How quickly things would change and how grateful I would become for my decision to wait. We returned from our honeymoon on a Sunday evening, tired but happy. As Robert plugged in his phone that had died during the drive home, it immediately began buzzing with notifications. His face tensed as he scrolled through what appeared to be multiple missed calls and messages from his mother. "Everything okay?" I asked, unpacking my suitcase. Robert sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's Dad. Mom says his heart condition is getting worse. They got some bills from the specialist, and they're struggling to cover them." I felt a pang of sympathy. "Is there anything we can do to help?" He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Actually, they invited us for dinner tomorrow night. I told Mom we'd come." The next evening we drove to Cambridge for dinner with Harold and Diane. Their house was a beautiful Victorian with a manicured lawn and expensive landscaping, not exactly the picture of financial hardship. I kept this observation to myself as Diane greeted us at the door, hugging Robert tightly, before giving me a stiff embrace. The dinner was pleasant enough on the surface. Harold was quiet but kind, asking about our honeymoon and my work. Diane, however, steered the conversation repeatedly toward financial matters. "You know, Robert was always so good with money, even as a child," she said, refilling her wine glass. "He saved every birthday check from his grandparents. Such a forward thinker." Robert shrugged. "Mom exaggerates. I spent plenty on video games." Diane continued as if he hadn't spoken. "And now he helps manage the portfolios of some very influential people. It's such important work. He mentioned, your parents are a teacher, and a nurse, Eleanor." "Yes," I replied, noticing how she made their professions sound somehow inadequate. "Such noble work," she said with a thin smile. "And your grandmother passed away last year, correct? Robert mentioned she was quite special to you." My guard immediately went up. "Yes, my Grandma Beatrice. She was amazing." Diane nodded, her eyes calculating. "Was she in real estate?" Robert mentioned something about that. I shot a look at Robert, who suddenly seemed very interested in his mashed potatoes. "She owned a few properties," I said vaguely. "She was very smart with her investments." "How wonderful!" Diane replied. Did she leave any of those investments to you? Property in Boston is so valuable these days. Before I could answer, Harold started coughing, momentarily drawing everyone's attention. When he recovered, the conversation shifted to his health, but I could feel Diane's eyes on me throughout the remainder of dinner. As Robert and his father moved to the living room to watch a baseball game, Diane asked me to help with dessert in the kitchen. Once we were alone, she wasted no time. Eleanor, I hope you don't mind me being direct. Harold and I are facing some significant medical expenses. The insurance covers some, but the specialists and treatments he needs, I just don't know how we're going to manage. I expressed genuine sympathy, but felt uncomfortable with where the conversation seemed to be heading. Robert has always helped us when he could, she continued, but now that he's married, I know he feels torn between his responsibilities to us and to you. She paused, giving me a pointed look. Family helps family. That's always been our way. I nodded non-committally and was relieved when Robert appeared in the doorway, announcing it was getting late and we should head home. On the drive back, I noticed Robert was unusually quiet. Your mom asked a lot of questions about Grandma B, I said carefully. He kept his eyes on the road. She was just making conversation. She seemed particularly interested in whether I inherited anything. Robert tightened his grip on the steering wheel. My parents are going through a hard time, Eleanor. Dad needs an expensive procedure, and their insurance is fighting them on covering it. I understand that and am sorry. But what does that have to do with my grandmother? He sighed heavily. I just thought maybe if you had inherited anything substantial, we could help them out. That's what marriage is, right? Sharing resources, helping family. The word substantial hung in the air between us. What exactly had Robert told his mother about my grandmother? I didn't inherit much. I said the lie, feeling bitter on my tongue. Just some personal items. Mementos. Robert said nothing for a long moment. Then, as if shifting gears emotionally, he suddenly started talking about looking for a bigger house. I think we should start house hunting soon, he said. That apartment of yours is fine for now, but it's really too small for the long term. With my promotion coming up, we could afford something much nicer. The sudden change in plans caught me off guard. Wait, what? We agreed we'd stay in my place for at least a year to save money. We just moved your things in last month. Plans change, Eleanor. We should be thinking bigger. Building a proper life together means upgrading. That night, as Robert slept beside me, I lay awake wondering why he had suddenly changed his mind about our living situation. We had specifically discussed staying in my affordable apartment to build our savings. Something felt off, but I tried to dismiss my concerns as newlywed anxiety. The next day, I called Amanda for lunch. We met at our favorite cafe, and after catching up on her gallery news, I cautiously brought up my concerns. Am I overreacting? I asked after explaining the dinner and Robert's new interest in house hunting. Amanda stirred her coffee thoughtfully. Eleanor, you know I adore you, and I want to be supportive, but I've never quite trusted Robert. There's something calculating behind that charm. That's a bit harsh, I protested, though part of me recognized the truth in her words. Maybe she conceded. But it's strange that the moment you get back from your honeymoon, his focus shifts to money and moving. She leaned forward. Did you ever tell him about the apartments? No, I admitted. I was going to eventually, but something kept holding me back. Keep it that way for now, Amanda advised. Just watch and wait. See where this goes. I felt guilty following her advice. This was my husband, after all. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and it would soon grow into something I couldn't ignore. 3 days later, I needed to visit one of the apartments near the university. A tenant was moving out, and I wanted to inspect the property before the management company prepared it for the next renter. I told Robert I was meeting a client, which wasn't entirely a lie, as I did have a work appointment later that afternoon. After checking the apartment and speaking with the departing tenant, I headed to my car. That's when I noticed a familiar figure across the street, pretending to look at his phone. It was Timothy, Robert's younger brother, who had recently moved to Boston for graduate school. When he realized I had spotted him, he quickly put his phone away and crossed the street toward me. Eleanor. What a coincidence, he said with an unconvincing smile. I was just in the neighborhood looking at apartments. This area is mostly student housing, I replied, noting his nervous demeanor. Are you thinking of moving? Maybe, he said vaguely. Hey, don't mention to Robert. You saw me okay. Has been helping me with rent, and I don't want him to think I'm apartment hunting behind his back. The explanation seemed flimsy, but I nodded. When I got back to my car, I sat for a moment, a sinking feeling in my stomach. Had Timothy been following me? And if so, why? That evening, Robert questioned me about my day with unusual specificity. Where exactly was this client meeting? Which building? How long were you there? His questions felt less like casual interest and more like verification of information he already had. When I mentioned grabbing coffee afterward, he asked which cafe and who I might have seen there. I deliberately didn't mention Timothy, wanting to see if Robert would bring it up himself. He didn't. 2 days later, we attended another family dinner. This time, Diane had invited Robert's aunt and uncle as well. Throughout the evening, Harold's health dominated the conversation with Diane, detailing the expensive treatments he needed. $80,000, she announced during dessert. That's what the specialists are asking for, and insurance is only covering a fraction. All eyes turned to Robert, and by extension to me. Family needs to come together at times like this, Diane said, her gaze fixing on me. We all need to contribute what we can. The pressure in the room was palpable. I felt like I was being assessed, measured for what I could provide to a family I'd only recently joined. Later that night, Robert was unusually distant. When I asked what was wrong, he exploded. My father's health is deteriorating, and you sit there like it's not your problem, he snapped. Do you even care? Of course I care, I responded, shocked by his outburst. But we just got married, Robert. We haven't even combined our finances, or made any long-term plans. Maybe it's time we did, he said, his voice cooling into something more calculated. We should put everything on the table, full financial transparency. Something in his tone sent a chill through me. I agreed we would sit down that weekend and go through our finances together, hoping to buy myself time to figure out what was happening. The next day, I came home early from work and found evidence that someone had been going through my home office. Documents were slightly out of place, and a folder containing personal papers had been moved. When Robert came home, I casually mentioned that I'd been thinking of reorganizing my files. Oh, why is that, he asked, not quite meeting my eyes. Just feeling disorganized. Some of my papers seem to be out of order. He shrugged. Maybe you moved them and forgot. You have been pretty stressed lately. That night after Robert fell asleep, I checked the browser history on our shared computer. What I found made my blood run cold. Recent searches included inheritance laws in Massachusetts, how to find property records, and contesting a will after marriage. Most disturbing was a search for can a spouse claim inheritance received before marriage. The next morning, I made an excuse about a work emergency and went straight to my lawyer Patricia's office. She had handled Grandma B's estate and knew my situation well. Eleanor, this is concerning, she said after I explained what had been happening. In Massachusetts, inheritances are generally considered separate property, not marital assets, as long as they haven't been commingled. But the fact that your husband is actively researching ways to access your inheritance suggests a premeditated intent. What should I do? I asked, my voice shaking. First, secure all your documents relating to the inheritance. Keep them somewhere your husband can't access, preferably in a safe deposit box. Second, make sure the rental income is going into an account in your name only. And third, she looked at me with sympathetic eyes, you might want to consider whether this marriage is what you thought it was. I left Patricia's office with a heavy heart, but a clearer mind. That evening, Robert and I had our most heated argument yet. He accused me of being secretive and untrustworthy, while I countered that he'd been invading my privacy. Marriage means sharing everything, he insisted. No secrets, no separate finances. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. That doesn't mean giving up all privacy or autonomy, I countered. And it certainly doesn't mean your family gets to dictate how we spend our money. So you're choosing yourself over my sick father? He asked, his voice dripping with accusation. Over your own husband? It's not about choosing sides, Robert. It's about setting healthy boundaries. He stormed out, saying he needed to clear his head. I sat alone in our apartment, thinking about what Grandma B would advise me to do. Somehow, I knew she would tell me to trust my instincts. And my instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with my new marriage. The following Tuesday, Robert left for work earlier than usual, saying he had an important client meeting. I was scheduled to work from home that day, finalizing designs for a restoration project. Around 10 in the morning, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Diane standing there with a man I didn't recognize who was carrying a briefcase. Eleanor, dear, Diane said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. May we come in? We have something important to discuss. Before I could object, she brushed past me into the apartment, the man following behind. This is Mr. Wilson, she said, gesturing to her companion. Hes a notary. My heart began to race as they settled themselves at my dining table without invitation. Mr. Wilson opened his briefcase and removed several legal-looking documents. What is this about? I asked, remaining standing. Diane maintained her artificial smile. It's about family, Eleanor. About doing what's right for everyone. She gestured to the papers on the table. We know about your grandmother's apartments. Robert told us everything. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression neutral. I don't know what you mean. Diane laughed, a brittle sound. Let's not play games. 3 properties in prime Boston locations. That's quite a windfall for someone from your background. Her tone made background sound like something distasteful. Mr. Wilson cleared his throat. These documents would transfer the properties into a family trust, he explained, for the benefit of all family members, particularly to cover Mr. Harold Campbell's medical expenses. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. You want me to sign over my inheritance to you? Not to me, Diane corrected. To the family. Robert would be a beneficiary too, of course. The apartments were just sitting there, generating rental income that could be put to better use, saving Harold's life. She leaned forward, her voice softening into something rehearsed. This is what families do, Eleanor. They take care of each other. I felt a strange calm settle over me. So this is why Robert married me. Diane had the grace to look momentarily uncomfortable before recovering. Robert loves you. But love and practical matters can go hand in hand. He told us about the properties months ago, right after your engagement. We waited until after the wedding to approach you, because we wanted you to feel secure in your place in the family first. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The timing of Robert's proposal shortly after Grandma B's death. His lack of interest in financial planning. The sudden push for a bigger house. Even Timothy following me to the apartment the week before. I will need time to review these documents with my lawyer, I said carefully. Diane's expression hardened. Harold's condition won't wait for legal reviews. We need to move forward today. She pulled out her phone. Robert's on his way. He thought it would be better if I explained things first, woman to woman. As if on cue, I heard a key in the lock and Robert walked in. He froze momentarily when he saw my face, then composed himself. Eleanor, he began. I see. Mom has explained the situation. Yes, I replied coldly. Your mother has explained that you've been planning to get your hands on my inheritance since before we were even engaged. It's not like that, he protested, moving toward me. I love you, but family obligations. Save it, I interrupted. You and I both know what this is about. You knew about the apartments all along. What did you do? Hire someone to investigate my grandmother after she died? Robert's silence was confirmation enough. Diane stood up, her patience visibly wearing thin. Enough drama, Eleanor. Either you sign these papers and become a true member of this family, or or what I challenged. Robert took over his voice, taking on a tone I'd never heard before. Or, our marriage is over before it really begins. Dad needs this treatment, and those apartments are sitting empty. They're not empty, I corrected. They're rented out, and the income is managed by a company my grandmother set up years ago. Even better, Diane interjected. Steady income that could cover Harold's treatments and still leave plenty for family needs. I noticed she kept emphasizing family, while conspicuously avoiding specifics about which family members would control these assets. I'm not signing anything, I stated firmly. These properties were left to me by my grandmother, and they remain my separate property under Massachusetts law. Diane's smirk was triumphant. Actually, once your married assets become communal property, Robert has rights. Not to inheritances kept separate, I replied. I spoke with my lawyer Patricia yesterday. She's thoroughly documented everything. The mention of my lawyer caused Diane's smirk to vanish instantly. Her face hardened into something ugly and true. You went behind Robert's back to a lawyer, she hissed. Just like he went behind mine to search for ways to get his hands on my inheritance, I countered. Robert stepped forward, his charming mask completely dropped now. You think you're so clever, don't you, little Eleanor with her secret fortune? You should be grateful I even married you. The statement hung in the air, revealing everything. Get out, I said quietly. Both of you get out of my home right now. This isn't over, Diane snapped, gathering the unsigned documents. Robert, let's go. Robert hesitated, perhaps realizing how completely Head revealed himself. Eleanor, we can talk about this rationally. I just thought. Now, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. As they moved toward the door, Robert turned back. This apartment is half mine now. You can't just kick me out. Watch me, I replied. And Robert, expect divorce papers by the end of the week. His face contorted with anger. You'll regret this. No one walks away from me. After they finally left, I locked the door, slid down against it, and let the tears come. Not for the loss of Robert. I now understood there had never been anything real to lose, but for the betrayal of what I thought we had shared. As soon as I could breathe normally again, I called Amanda. She arrived 20 minutes later with coffee and a fierce protective energy that I desperately needed. I can't believe they just showed up with a notary, she said, pacing my living room. Actually, no. I can totally believe it. That woman has predator written all over her. I nodded numbly, still processing the morning's events. I just keep thinking about all the signs I missed. The way he changed the subject whenever I brought up our financial future. How he never wanted to talk about savings or investments despite being a financial advisor. Amanda sat beside me. What are you going to do now? I need to protect myself, I said, the shock giving way to determination. First step is securing my finances. I logged into our joint account, which Wed set up after the wedding for household expenses. It had been drained completely. The transaction history showed a withdrawal that morning right around the time Robert had left for his supposed client meeting. Has taken everything I said, showing Amanda the screen. Can he do that legally? She asked. It's a joint account, so yes. But it was mostly my money in there. I explained, the anger building. Most of our paychecks were still going to our individual accounts. We were planning to change that this month. We spent the next hour making calls. I froze my credit, contacted my bank to alert them to potential fraud, and made an emergency appointment with Patricia for that afternoon. While I was making these arrangements, my phone continuously lit up with texts and calls from Robert, alternating between threats and pleas. Eleanor, you're overreacting. Call me. You can't just throw away our marriage. We need to talk. My mother was out of line, but you're being unreasonable. If you go through with this, you'll be sorry. I turned off my phone, unable to deal with his manipulation. Just before we left for the lawyer's office, my sister Jessica called on Amanda's phone. She lived in Chicago and had been on a business trip during the wedding. Amanda told me what's happening, she said without preamble. I'm on the next flight to Boston. Jess, you don't have to. Yes, I absolutely do, she interrupted. No one messes with my sister. At Patricia's office, we laid out everything that had happened. She listened carefully, taking notes, and occasionally asking clarifying questions. This is serious, she said when I finished. The fact that they came to your home with documents already prepared attempting to pressure you into signing without legal counsel constitutes duress and potentially fraud. What do I do now? I asked. Patricia leaned forward. First, we file for divorce immediately. Given the circumstances, we request a temporary restraining order, preventing Robert from entering your apartment or accessing any of your separate assets. Second, we thoroughly document the inheritance as separate property. Third, she said, her expression grave, you might want to consider moving temporarily. If Robert truly believed he was about to gain control of valuable real estate, he may not accept defeat gracefully. That night I packed essential items and moved into one of my grandmother's apartments, the one near the university that had just been vacated. Amanda and Jessica, who arrived late that evening, helped me set up the basics. The property was sparsely furnished, but it was secure, and most importantly, Robert didn't know I owned it. Over the next few days, Robert's behavior followed the classic pattern of an abuser. He cycled between angry accusations, tearful apologies, and manipulative appeals to my compassion. When none of that worked, he began a campaign to turn our mutual friends against me. Jessica, who had taken an immediate dislike to Robert the few times they'd met, finally confessed what she'd been holding back. I never told you this because you seemed so happy, she said as we sat in my temporary living room, surrounded by takeout containers. But when I met Robert at your engagement party, he cornered me to ask about Grandma B's estate. What? I exclaimed. What did he want to know? If she'd left you anything valuable. If you had mentioned any inheritance. He played it off as wanting to surprise you, with something related to her memory. But it felt wrong. She squeezed my hand. I should have said something. I shook my head. I probably wouldn't have listened. I was so caught up in the fantasy. As the initial shock wore off, I began to see patterns in my relationship with Robert that I'd been blind to before. How he always redirected conversations when they didn't serve his interests. How he subtly undermined my confidence while appearing supportive. The way he isolated me from friends like Amanda who saw through him. Most painful was the realization that his entire courtship might have been strategic, beginning shortly after Grandma B's cancer diagnosis. Had he somehow learned about her properties and targeted me specifically? The thought made me physically ill. One evening, as I sorted through old texts and emails from Robert, looking for evidence of his deception, I found something that confirmed my worst fears. In an email, had accidentally synced to our shared cloud account, I discovered a message to Diane from 2 months before our engagement. Mom confirmed through county records. Grandmother owns 3 properties in prime locations. Conservative estimate of total value, $2.5 million plus ongoing rental income, moving forward with the plan. We'll propose next month after the funeral. Eleanor suspects nothing. The clinical calculation of it, the cold assessment of my worth in dollar terms, broke something inside me. I sobbed until I had no tears left, grieving not just for my failed marriage, but for the love I thought had been real. When I showed the email to Patricia, her expression turned steely. This changes everything, she said. This is premeditated fraud. We can now prove he entered the marriage under false pretenses with the specific intent to access your assets. The discovery of the email marked a turning point. My grief began to transform into resolve. I would not let Robert and his family take what Grandma B had worked so hard to provide for me. More importantly, I would not let them break me. A week after I moved out, Robert showed up unannounced at my office. Had been texting that he wanted to talk, but I'd refused to meet him alone. Seeing him standing in the reception area of my architectural firm sent a jolt of anxiety through me. Eleanor, please, he said, his voice soft and contrite. The charming Robert I'd fallen for. Just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Against my better judgment, I agreed to speak with him in a small conference room with glass walls in full view of my colleagues. Once seated, Robert launched into a well-rehearsed speech about misunderstandings and family pressure. He claimed Diane had acted without his full knowledge, that he truly loved me, that we could start fresh. "I want us to be honest with each other," he said, reaching for my hand across the table. I pulled back. "Like you were honest when you researched my grandmother's properties before proposing, or when you told your mother about my inheritance after I specifically kept it private." His expression flickered between surprise and calculation. "I found the email, Robert. The one where you laid out your plan to your mother before you even proposed." The mask slipped then just for a moment, revealing a flash of cold anger before he composed himself again. "Eleanor, that email is being taken out of context. I was just—" "Save it," I interrupted. "I filed for divorce yesterday. My lawyer will be contacting yours." His demeanor changed instantly. The charming facade vanished, replaced by something hard and ugly. "You think you're so smart," he hissed, leaning forward. "But you have no idea who you're dealing with. My family has connections you can't imagine." "Is that a threat?" I asked, loud enough for my colleagues to hear. He stood abruptly. "This isn't over. Those properties should be helping my father, not sitting in your portfolio while you play architect." Security escorted him from the building, and I immediately called Patricia to report the encounter. The next phase was brutal. Diane launched what can only be described as a smear campaign among our social circle. She contacted mutual friends with stories about me refusing to help save Harold's life, painting me as a cold-hearted gold digger who had hidden assets from her loving husband. Some people believed her. Friends I thought knew me well started avoiding me or sending questioning texts. The isolation might have broken me, if not for the unwavering support of Amanda, Jessica, and my parents who came to Boston to help me through this period. The legal proceedings were equally vicious. Robert's lawyer, a friend of Diane's family, demanded half of all my assets, including the inherited properties, claiming they had been commingled with marital assets. Patricia fought back with documentation, showing the properties had always been kept separate. She also submitted the damning email as evidence of Robert's fraudulent intent entering the marriage. As we prepared for court, more unsavory details emerged. Background checks revealed that Robert and his family had significant debt hidden behind their facade of wealth. Harold and Diane had remortgaged their Cambridge home multiple times and faced potential foreclosure. Robert's supposedly prestigious job managed much smaller portfolios than had claimed, and he had a history of financial mismanagement that had followed him from firm to firm. Most disturbing was the discovery that I'd apparently not been the first target. A year before meeting me, Robert had briefly been engaged to another woman whose family owned valuable commercial real estate. That engagement had ended abruptly under circumstances that now seemed suspicious. 3 months into the divorce proceedings, we had a settlement conference with both lawyers present. Robert arrived with Diane in tow, though she'd been explicitly told only parties and their legal counsel could attend. "I can't be here without my mother," Robert insisted when the mediator asked Diane to leave. "She's providing moral support." "Moral support," Patricia repeated, with undisguised contempt. "Is that what we're calling it now?" The mediator, a seasoned family court judge, allowed Diane to stay, but warned her not to speak. She ignored this instruction within minutes, interrupting Patricia to accuse me of heartlessness. "Harold's condition is deteriorating while she hoards property," Diane exclaimed. "This is a matter of life and death." The judge fixed Diane with a stern look. "Mrs. Campbell, if you speak out of turn again, you'll be removed. This is a legal proceeding, not a family dispute at your dining table." The settlement conference quickly revealed the weakness of Robert's position. When Patricia presented the email evidence along with the documented timeline showing Robert's courtship had begun suspiciously soon after my grandmother's diagnosis, even Robert's lawyer looked uncomfortable. When we took a break, I overheard Robert's lawyer strongly advising him to settle. "Your position is untenable," she said bluntly. The judge is clearly sympathetic to Eleanor, and if this goes to trial, you could face accusations of fraud. Robert and Diane huddled together, whispering furiously. When we reconvened, Robert's lawyer announced they would accept a settlement, wherein Robert would relinquish all claims to my separate property, in exchange for me waiving any claims to alimony. Patricia and I had anticipated this, and agreed immediately. By the end of the day, we had a signed agreement that protected my inheritance completely, and ended my brief, painful marriage with no ongoing financial entanglements. As we gathered our papers to leave, Robert approached me one last time. "You think you've won," he said quietly, "but you still lost a year of your life on a marriage that was never real." I looked at him calmly, no longer feeling the pain his words were intended to inflict. "That's where you're wrong, Robert. I gained something invaluable, lessons I won't forget, and strength I didn't know I had." His face flushed with anger, but Diane pulled him away before he could respond. As they walked out, I watched them, a mother and son, united in their sense of entitlement and their willingness to use others for financial gain. I felt a profound sadness for them, living in such a transactional world where relationships were just another form of currency. The divorce was finalized 2 weeks later. I stood on the courthouse steps afterward, feeling lighter than I had in months. The legal nightmare was over, but the emotional journey of healing was just beginning. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I stood in the living room of my newly renovated apartment, the downtown property that had been part of Grandma B's legacy. After the divorce, I decided to move into this space and make it truly mine, using my architectural skills to transform it into a sanctuary. The process of redesigning the apartment became a metaphor for rebuilding my life, a careful assessment of what to keep, what to discard, and what new elements to incorporate. I knocked down walls that blocked natural light, just as I removed the emotional barriers I'd built around myself. I preserved the original hardwood floors and crown molding, honoring the history and foundation, much like I held onto the core values Grandma B had instilled in me. The transformation wasn't just physical. In those 6 months, I had done the hard work of emotional healing as well. Initially, I struggled with shame and self-doubt. How could I, an educated, independent woman, have been so thoroughly deceived? The question haunted me through sleepless nights. My sister Jessica, who had extended her stay in Boston for several weeks after the confrontation, helped me see the situation more clearly. "Eleanor," she said, "during one of our late-night talks, you weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Manipulators like Robert study how to appear genuine. They perfect their craft." Amanda reinforced this perspective, reminding me that Robert's deception reflected his character flaws, not mine. Gradually, I stopped blaming myself for not seeing the red flags sooner. Instead, I focused on understanding what those flags had been, cataloging them, not as a way to dwell on the past, but as protection for the future. 3 months after the divorce, I made a significant professional change. Using my apartment near the university as office space, I launched my own small architectural firm, specializing in renovating historical properties. Years of working for others had given me valuable experience and connections, and now I was ready to build something of my own. The rental income from the third apartment provided financial security during this transition. I thought often of Grandma B during this time, grateful for her foresight and the independence her gift had provided. She had known firsthand how financial freedom could save a woman from remaining in harmful situations. As my business grew, I found myself sharing my story cautiously at first with other women in my network. To my surprise, many had experienced similar betrayals or knew someone who had. We formed an informal support group meeting monthly to share experiences and advice. Through these connections, I met Sophia, a financial advisor, with a passion for educating women about economic empowerment. We collaborated on a series of workshops for women on protecting assets and recognizing financial red flags in relationships. My personal healing came in waves. Some days I felt strong and grateful for the lessons learned. Other days the betrayal still stung, and I questioned my ability to trust again. I worked with a therapist who specialized in recovery from manipulative relationships, gradually developing healthier boundaries and a stronger sense of self. 1 year after my divorce, I ran into an old college friend, Marcus, at an architectural exhibition. We had been close during our university days but had lost touch over the years. There was an ease to our reconnection, a comfortable familiarity free from pressure or expectation. We began meeting for coffee occasionally, simply enjoying each other's company without any rush toward romance. When I eventually shared my experience with Robert Marcus, response was telling. Instead of offering platitudes or immediately trying to distinguish himself as different, he simply listened, asked thoughtful questions, and expressed genuine anger on my behalf. As we continued to see each other, I approached the relationship with new wisdom. I observed his actions more than his words, noticing how he respected my boundaries and never pushed for more than I was ready to give. Most importantly, I trusted my instincts, the very instincts I had ignored with Robert. Looking back, I realized that keeping my inheritance private hadn't been the problem. The problem had been choosing the wrong person to marry. A true partner would have respected my autonomy and celebrated my financial security rather than seeing it as something to appropriate. In honor of Grandma B, I established a small scholarship in her name, using a portion of the rental income. The Beatrice Martin Scholarship for Women's Financial Independence provided education and resources for women leaving abusive relationships. It felt like the perfect way to extend her legacy beyond just my life. As I stand here today looking out the window of my beautiful apartment at the Boston skyline, I feel a profound gratitude for the painful wisdom I gained. I learned that independence isn't about isolation or distrust, but about entering relationships from a position of strength rather than need. I learned that the right people celebrate your success and security instead of seeking to control it. I learned that financial independence, especially for women, isn't selfish, it's essential. Most importantly, I learned that Grandma B was right all along. Having something that is completely yours gives you the freedom to make choices based on love, rather than necessity. It gives you the power to walk away, when walking away is the only healthy option. If you're watching this, and my story resonates with you, remember that protecting yourself isn't selfish. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Maintain healthy financial boundaries even in the most loving relationships. And know that if you do find yourself in a situation like mine, healing is possible on the other side. Have you ever kept something private in a relationship that later proved to be a wise decision? Or have you noticed financial red flags that made you reconsider a relationship? Please share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else recognize warning signs in their own life. And if you found value in my experience, please like and subscribe to support this channel. Thank you for listening, and remember, every ending, even painful ones, can lead to beautiful new beginnings.